Hello, my friends, and welcome back to the... Oh, dear goodness, this game is fast! Welcome back to the Review Den. I've been going through the Wipeout series and just finished with 2097, but before we move on to Wipeout 3, or Whip It Out. Before we move on, we need to take a detour to cover a very cool side game in the series that I'm convinced does not get the credit it deserves, and that is Wipeout 64. When it comes to Nintendo, I don't think there's anybody that can deny that their first-party titles are usually great, but third-party ports and spin-offs are a very mixed bag. Even when there's parity between console performance, if anyone is going to wind up with the weaker port, it's usually Nintendo. But every once in a while, you'll get a third-party developer that actually puts the time and effort in to give Nintendo fans a crazy good game. And Wipeout 64 may be one of those titles. It's an interesting case, too. Wipeout 64 is not Wipeout 1.5, as some game journos have said, nor is it an all-new sequel to 2097. Rather, it takes the 2097 game engine, the ships, and combat, but completely reworks the track's campaign and even the physics for a new experience. It's as if Psygnosis took the bones of what they had, but added a lot of new parts. And the result isn't just good, it's actually really good. If you're a Wipeout fan but missed out on 64 thinking this was a watered-down version for Nintendo like I did, you might want to check this out. Wipeout 64 is an anti-gravity racing game based on 2097, but is reworked with new content and gameplay. As before, you'll pilot a high-speed hovercraft and need to navigate challenging tracks and battle with your opponents to clear your way through the campaign challenges. This time though, Psygnosis developed their title specifically for the Nintendo 64 hardware, and they started with the controls. As 2097 came out before the DualShock, Wipeout 64 was the first game to fully feature analog controls from the get-go, and the difference is immediate.
But Jonathan,
you specifically mentioned that the first two games could use the Namco NeGcon Twisty controller for analog control. Yes, and you know what else the NeGcon is? A third-party accessory. The NeGcon was essentially a miniature steering wheel with a massive 180-degree turning range in either direction, but was missing enough buttons that it couldn't properly replace a standard controller. So in terms of typical first-party analog sticks as we know them, Wipeout 64 was the first outing. And much like Bungie working its magic with analog controls in the first Halo, Psygnosis made sure the handling in Wipeout 64 felt responsive and natural. In fact, they mentioned how impressed they were with the precision and speed of Nintendo's controller. Say whatever you want about that thing, but in the right hands, it was awesome. Small adjustments and easy turns are now completely natural, you don't need to feather the controls, while response is still quick enough to handle high-speed switchbacks. See, the earliest Wipeouts were purposely designed to be floaty. The developers wanted players to battle against momentum and gravity, but that did mean losing some speed in the turns. So as time went on, the series became more direct handling, and it definitely began here in 64. Steering response is immediate, giving the craft a much lighter and faster feel. Oh, they'll still understeer into a wall if you take corners too fast, but you don't need to start your turns well ahead of time. If older Wipeouts were slippery powerboats, Wipeout 64 is a superbike. It's a different feel, and admittedly some players prefer the more unique older style, but you cannot deny that this gameplay is great, and boy is it fast. I mentioned that Wipeout 2097 introduced the crazy Phantom Speed class, but started players out on a new Easy level, or Vector class. This time, they skip that and get right to the big boys, at least in the campaign. The tracks are all new, and while later courses still have blind corners and U-turns, they all seem to flow much faster. In fact, these are some of the smoothest racing courses of the series yet. Memorization is still the key to winning. If you don't know the turns or braking points, you will lose. But when you know the general racing lines, it is slick. Whether you're rolling into undersea tunnels, taking kangaroo jumps, or threading the needle through switchbacks, the tracks seem less designed to punish you with sudden tricks and more to keep the overall speed up, as long as you have the fundamentals down. Even wall slides are more permissive. You can get away with some high-speed scrapes, especially in the air. That's not to say Wipeout's gone easy. Completing challenges with gold usually requires a mistake-free run, but the whole game keeps a faster pace. Where 2097 was much more technical, 64 is about high-speed perfection. Combat sees an overhaul too, placing a heavier emphasis on eliminating opponents and actually setting the stage for future installments. Most of the weapons from 2097 return, including guided and unguided missiles, mines, bombs, and shields, but the one-shot kill plasma bolt is removed, and in its place are 5 new super weapons exclusive to each craft. Kyrex gets an energy wall to block opponents, Oricom gets a charge beam similar to the plasma but can travel through multiple targets, AG System gets an energy leech, Piranha gets a cloak, and Phisar gets a minigun, which is actually really cool as not only is it super effective, but it was featured as a cheat code in 2097, so rather than just dumping it, I guess they went ahead and made it official in 64. The new weapons are all satisfying to use, and the nice thing is you're actually encouraged to use them now, thanks to the new campaign structure. Yes, while the first Wipeout featured a typical points-based championship, and 2097 featured a mix of single-track challenges and championships, Wipeout 64 features 4 sets of individual challenges across 4 disciplines. It may not be the longest campaign running, but it does a good job of playing up each aspect of the Wipeout experience. Race is the standard race type against a full field of competitors, and time trials are one-shot laps with only the clock as your rival. But eliminations set you up with custom weapon sets with the singular goal of taking out as many opponents as possible. The new handling makes the weapons easier to aim, and between the aggressive opponents and new super weapons, the combat challenges wind up being crazy fun. It's no surprise these show up in later Wipeouts. Complete all 6 of each of these challenges with at least a bronze to unlock the Super Combo series, which combines racing and combat challenges, and nail a gold in each of the series to unlock a bonus 7th challenge. All total, there are 28 challenges, which again isn't a ton, but along the way you'll unlock the Piranha Super Ship, the high-speed bonus track Velocitar, and a double damage upgrade, all of which you can take back into the free race modes. Graphically, Wipeout 64 makes a few trade-offs compared to its Sony counterparts. Where 2097 had dense urban areas to play up the PlayStation's sharper graphics, 64 sticks to more organic areas, more in line with Nintendo's softer visuals. There's plenty of colored lighting and some nice standout tracks like the underwater tunnel and the forest planet. Hey, it's Kashyyyk, get Chewie to take over! But the real highlight here is the frame rate. It's not 60 frames per second, F-Zero X takes that crown, but it pushes beyond the standard 30, which really fits well with the speeds you'll reach. Split screen bogs down quite a bit, especially in 4-player, but for the single-player experience, the game runs smooth and looks almost as good as 2097. No Wipeout would be complete without pulsing techno music, so you'll be happy to know, yes, they did squeeze a licensed soundtrack in here. There's a few songs from Fluke and Propellerheads, but the majority of the soundtrack is covered by Mark Bandola, who we last saw pitching in with the Sega Saturn version of Wipeout. They're all good drum and bass sets to keep the pace up, but personally, I don't think it quite matches the awesomeness of Tim Wright. Mark Bandola has done great work for a lot of video games, but Tim Wright is the sound of Wipeout. I also wish they kept the original Absurd from Fluke rather than the remix. That song was dark techno before it was even a thing, but all of these are personal nitpicks. It's good music, and I'm just glad they squeezed a licensed soundtrack onto the cartridge. Overall, I was totally surprised at how good and how different Wipeout 64 was. Nintendo sometimes draws the short straw when it comes to big-name ports, but Psygnosis really went all in to give the N64 an experience that played to its strengths. Which of the 2 games you prefer between 2097 and this is certainly a matter of taste. Some like the technical handling and urban designs of the original game, while here you'll get faster speeds, smoother courses, and some killer combat. It foreshadows the changes that Wipeout would come to be known for, but don't let that throw you. This is still classic Psygnosis. You'll need to memorize the tracks. Getting gold medals requires absolute perfection, and while presentation may not be quite as iconic here as it was on Sony's platforms, you won't mistake this for anything but Wipeout. F-Zero X and Arrow Gauge may be the big players for the genre on Nintendo's platform, but don't overlook Wipeout 64. It's a unique experience that fully deserves its spot in the Wipeout family. Thank you all so much for watching. I appreciate each and every one of you, and if you'd like to help a small channel grow, would you be my next subscriber? I'll be back next time with another review, and until then, be sure to keep going, because you are worth it.